A Fear the Fro podcast.
We're approaching trading season, and you know what that means.
Get rid of them.
A special time for angry fans wielding chaos with a trading machine.
Trade accepted.
Fear the Fro tradition, a trade for every team.
Every team.
From good to bad.
Dog shit.
To rad. Now here is Bob to
Set the scene.
Rate and review this podcast with 5 stars.
Yeah. Welcome to the Fear the Fro podcast. Very special podcast. First of the new year, coming off some feel-good victories. And joining me, my first guest of 2026, a repeat guest, a man you know all too well from the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show, Mike Lucas. McNuggets back on the pod. Thank you. Happy New Year, Mike.
Happy New Year to you too, Bob. We had grand plans for this podcast, like plans that I think would have taken us probably longer to map out than it would take me to put together 3 or 4 UCSS shows. So I'm glad we decided to
break it into
narrow it down a little bit, and we're going to have some fun with some fake trades because there is no better way in the content world to start off a new calendar year.
Exactly. See, this is a fake trade-a-palooza of a podcast. And to be honest, the idea was formulated when things were probably at a low point. But now things are on the upswing. So some of these may seem far-fetched to you. Some of them are absolutely absurd. But as we approach the deadline, the noise is only going to get louder. And it's a fun exercise if for no other reason than throughout the course of the conversation, it will reveal some of the limitations that we have, some of the philosophies that maybe Mike and I differ on personally as far as how we would approach it. And, you know, it's just fun to fantasize about good players being added to your team or changing things or whatever the case may be. Now, that may not be the correct decision, but who cares? This is a thought exercise. So what we decided to do today is because, like Mike said, it was grand plans. The song said a trade for every team. However, it will not be a trade for every team today. It will be a trade just for the Eastern Conference. We're at best going to break this into 2 podcasts. And if this one is an absolute debacle, then who knows? I'm not promising anything for the Western Conference, but hopefully this will be a fun exercise. We will revisit the other conference in a week or so, whatever time schedules may allow. We've got time as we head towards the trade deadline. But Mike?
I want to just make sure people understand one thing. All the deals that we throw out today work under the second apron restrictions and the money works, all that. Bob, I love this version of the Cavs team. Like, I really do enjoy a lot of these players. Selfishly, I cannot wait till the Cavs are not a second apron team so we could have fun with the trade machine again without having to pull and push 12 different levers to get some of these crazy deals to work.
It true.
Is incredibly frustrating when you're sitting on the SPO-Track trade machine.
It's absolutely
knowing
true.
The restrictions, and you're like, there's just no way. Like, now we're doing 8-for-1 deals so we can aggregate salaries to get below the second eight.
Yeah, Mike is absolutely correct.
Get below the second apron, please.
We are the only second apron team. It is the most prohibitive thing of any squad in the NBA. It's also exceptionally difficult to make trades if you're one of the teams in the first apron. And I know I don't expect you guys to, be up on every other squad in the league, but there's 6 other teams that effectively are nearly impossible for the Cavs to trade with because teams both in the second apron and first apron cannot take in more money than they send out in a trade. So common sense would tell you, well, we can't make trades with first apron teams without involving a third team because both parties are not allowed to take back more money than they send out. All those things will reveal themselves. I think the best way to kind of have that discussion is it's just going to come up organically as we go through the teams here. So I'm going to hit the Eastern Conference, and I think a good way to do it is to just go alphabetically here. Through the rest of the Eastern Conference. So let's begin with Atlanta. Mike, you just interrupt me if you have a trade for the specific teams that I bring up. If not, I'll lead. I'll pitch you mine. Oh, timeout? What do we got?
No. I just wanted to add one thing. Just because we're proposing these trades, I don't think that means we would necessarily accept these trades. We're just hypothetically speaking. And I just want people listening to understand that just because we put something out there, we are not saying we'd actually accept this.
Exactly.
These are just hypothetical deals that are fun to discuss. Just want to make sure everyone's on the same page.
If I was a reputable journalist, if I was Brian Windhurst in this situation, this would where I would opine about being aggregated falsely. I really don't give a shit what you do with me. These are absolutely farcical deals. Some of them I would do, some of them I definitely wouldn't do. The obligation was to come up with one for every team. So there are some that I just have to shoehorn in there so that I don't skip them. With Atlanta, I'm going to start out with an absolute turd in the punch bowl trade. It is not exciting. It's not convoluted. It's very straightforward. Craig Porter Jr. on the ascent, which we can touch on here, Mike. But the last 2 games, Lonzo Ball has got a DNP. Did not play. And Kenny talked about how, well, for the next 18 days or whatever, the Cavs play basically every other day. There are no back-to-backs, but he sat Lonzo Ball, and I think we can all acknowledge that in his absence, Craig Porter Jr., Jalen Tyson, and the team has looked a hell of a lot better in the last 2 games. Now, maybe that won't, continue. Maybe that's just a bump in the road, but certainly it opens me up to the idea that Lonzo Ball and his $10 million virtual expiring salary, because it's not guaranteed for next year, is something that the Cavs could come off. In this scenario, because Atlanta is a team that also, pretends to be a contender or perceives themselves as a contender. They've been in a lot of trade rumors, be it Anthony Davis, Trae Young's name has been in things. Mine is just a straight cash dump. We give them Lonzo Ball because they have a traded player exception from the deal they made with the Clippers where they dumped Bogdan Bogdanović onto their books that will expire this season. That means they can absorb Lonzo's whole salary without taking anything back. Why would the Cavs do it? Well, one, the usage of Lonzo Ball seems a lot more questionable with Craig Porter Jr. It could be depending on how you look at it, addition by subtraction in that it would provide Craig Porter Jr. with more opportunity. But secondarily to that, $10 million in space for the Cavs when they are $22 million into the second apron is roughly equivalent to 50 to 60 million of tax dollars.
Yes.
Somewhere in that neighborhood. I didn't do the exact math, but generally speaking, we're between $5 and $7 on the dollar, depending on where we sit in this second apron payroll situation. So financially, it would make all the sense in the world for the Cavs to do it. It's not bringing you back anything of playable value, but it's opening up another roster spot. I think we all assume Tomlin's going to get brought up at some point. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would do it. This is simply a money move. I went a little, so I don't have a deal for every Eastern Conference team, but I did have a couple I like, and I actually do have one for Atlanta. I'll pitch to you in a sec, Bob. It's a little more interesting than a straight up money dump. But listen,
start out on a low night, guys. A low point, guys.
I mean, listen, these aren't all winners. Lonzo, I had high expectations, Bob. I'm not sure what you thought he would bring to this team. I really did think that he was going to help unlock Evan Mobley on the second unit. I do think he does some good things still, but when he's shooting 28% from the floor, 30% from the floor, whatever it is, 26 from beyond the arc, and taking enough threes to qualify on all the leaderboards, he's not that good. Like, you can't have an absolute zero at the point guard position from an offensive standpoint, especially because he's not a driver.
Well, and that's the thing we talked about, right, is that even if his three-point shot returned to his career averages, which are around the NBA league average of 35, 34, somewhere in that range. But even if they did that, I just don't know that he does enough to get the bigs involved, where what I've liked about Craig is all the analytics say that Craig out there with Jared Allen produces a much better Jared Allen. And I think you can kind of make the same argument with Evan Mobley. It might not be as overstated in terms of analytics, but I don't know that I like what I've seen in terms of how Lonzo's play style. There are things I like. I think defensively he's solid. I like the hit aheads. But I think he's more of an east-west ball mover than a north-south offensive generator.
And it just hasn't worked.
It hasn't. And that's not to say it never could. But the other thing I think is we just financially, I know nobody cares about the money, but I guarantee the front office cares about the money. And in that regard, you have Craig locked up on an extremely cheap deal for the next couple of years. Why wouldn't you want to lean into that if it's producing better results?
So I like this, Bob. Let me throw you out my Atlanta potential deal here. Not saying I would necessarily do this, but Kristaps Porzingis is a swing that the Atlanta Hawks made this summer. He can't stay healthy. He's sick, injured, yada, yada. They have a Congo at center, but I think they're still looking for some other big man depth. I am much higher on Zachariah Risachet than many, and apparently he has been at least floated around considering the plethora of wings that Atlanta has. Kobe stole, maybe steal's not the right word anymore, but Kobe acquired DeAndre Hunter from that Atlanta team. What about a Jared Allen for Zachariah Risachet swap? Add a young, high ceiling, in my opinion. I know some people are a little sour on him. 3-and-D wing. You save a little bit of money. If you're not going to play Jared Allen in the fourth quarter anyway, which we can go back and forth on whether that's the right decision or not, but Kenny's made it pretty clear that when everyone's healthy, Jared Allen plays, I believe it's the 11th most minutes per fourth quarter, which, once again, we can argue whether you agree or disagree. But Yeah, once again, I'm just, it's the facts. Kenny has decided he does not like Jared Allen in those closing lineups. Would you take a flyer on a young first overall pick last year who has been decent so far, but has certainly not lived up to the first overall pick billing, and take a swing on that upside at a position where you can never have enough big wings? He does have all the size, in theory, the skill to be a productive NBA player. And he hasn't been bad in Atlanta. He just hasn't been first overall pick. So I thought that one was at least a fun discussion to have. If you're not going to utilize Jared to the maximum of his abilities, and he's not going to be a guy that you foresee playing in the fourth quarter, in crunch time, in big playoff situations, could you take a swing on an upside player like a Zachariah Risacher? Hope he pans out, and maybe he turns into your long-term answer for the DeAndre Hunter spot at small forward when they certainly don't re-sign him in 2 years.
Here's my thoughts on it.
And I know you love Jared Allen too, so
I do. Well, that goes without saying, but let's just take that off the table for the moment. My biggest concerns with a situation like this would be, I like deals where you bring back guys on rookie contracts that have multiple years left. So in that regard, I like it. I don't like it from a roster fit standpoint, because quite frankly, one of my biggest concerns is we have all these conversations every time there's a dud from Jared Allen about rebounding. We want to subtract his rebounding and add yet another wing when we have Hunter, we have Wade, we have Max coming back, we have Tyson emerging. I don't know that I think it's more useful than us. I think it will only exacerbate the rebounding problem. So when I look at these Allen deals, and I will listen to any Allen proposal, but the ones that are received the best by me typically are ones where we at least get some sort of replacement value in terms of the stuff that people are unhappy with. Like, if you're willing to give up the offense of an Allen, because like you said, we don't really take advantage of it. It does not seem like Kenny likes to lean into those lineups, regardless of what the outcome has been. Now, my hope is these last two games will be a drop in the bucket that turns into a steady
very good
stream
the last two games,
into a waterfall.
yes.
Not just Allen. Even like we talked about that in the San Antonio game, and I saw people post stuff about, well, look at what Allen did against Wemby. I don't think it was Allen against Wemby. I think it was a lot of Allen taking advantage of Cornette, but I think the two big construction has been exceptionally productive against a team like San Antonio. And I think in general, just this season, if you isolate it to this season, you bring in other seasons, and yeah, it's a little more A-B. Sometimes the small lineups have been better. But right now, the big lineups and the core four and those groups have been working. And I love what we're seeing from off-position rebounding from guys like Tyson and Craig Porter Jr. And in that regard, I think we're better set than we were in past seasons. But you take a guy like Jared Allen out of the mix and you don't replace the rebounding in any way, and that's where I would have concerns. That being said, I think Risacher has some things that I find enticing. I think the reason he's being floated out, though, by Atlanta is because he's just below that threshold of guys we would not come off for any reason. And he still has the cachet of being a number one pick, where people look at it like they call it a second draft,
exactly. Yeah.
And in that regard, I'm not super high on it, but I can understand the logic behind doing it. You lose money, you gain rookie control over a guy who is very young, still has a lot to come up on. And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, it definitely feels like more of a Kenny style of basketball than it does the way that he's utilizing Jared Allen at the moment.
And we know Kenny coached on the French national team, and Risacher is a French player who.
Why stop there? Just go after Wemby.
Listen, and real quick on the two bigs, because there are other. I'm sure Allen's going to come up again, and we might as well just have this conversation real quick, so we don't have to have it every time he comes up. The two bigs work best when you have guards that are getting into the paint, and it's no surprise that all of a sudden the Jared Allen and Evan Mobley combo lineups are looking a lot better as Darius Garland continues to get healthier and healthier, and the Cavs' paint touches have been up. Their drives have been up. Darius's playmaking over the last week and a half outside of the Houston game has been about as good as I can remember at any stage of this core four.
Yeah. 3 of his 4 double-digit assist games in the last 6, they said on the broadcast.
Yeah, and if you go back to the Spurs game on Monday, you said it wasn't Jared versus Wemby. I agree, did a lot versus Cornette, but it was a lot of Jared open because the big step up to stop the drive, and it's a little dump off and a finish. Like, Allen's not a guy you're running offense through. He's a finisher. He's a recipient of ball movement, of penetration, of guys stepping up so you can dump it off to him, and that's why he shoots for his career in the 60% from the floor. That's what he does. And Mobley could be a recipient of that too. So, yeah, I'm not – obviously we're doing a whole podcast on fake trades. I'm not in any rush to shake things up, Bob. If you're the Cavs, I'm letting this play out and see what this little recent uptick in production will pan out. But people who are like, oh, my God, Jared Allen, like he could catch the ball again because his fingers aren't broken. Kind of a big deal when you're a recipient and you're trying to catch passes to then go finish. And he even said, yeah, I could barely catch. I couldn't shake Kenny's hand after games. Both my fingers were broken. And
why would he want to shake the guy's hand who benches him in the fourth quarter?
You get what I'm saying. And Darius is back to looking as close to Darius pre-injury that we've seen. So you do the math. The 2 + 2 = 4 in this situation when it doesn't always. But at least that was a fun first one to throw out there.
I agree. All right, so I'm going to move on to, I guess it's Boston for me. All right, Boston. The trade that I came up with for them, because this is a situation where, again, it's a Lonzo dump. I sent Lonzo to the Celtics. Now, in this situation, I had to involve a third-party team, the Nets. And the reason I did that is because I was trying to look at what the rationale for the Celtics would be. When I look at that Celtics roster, they are playing incredibly well, given the unfortunate injury to Tatum. I think they're doing way better than everybody expected. I think you're seeing incredible seasons from Kata, from Jordan Walsh, from Jaylen Brown, of course, is playing incredibly well. And when you look at their roster, when they brought back Simons in the deal with Portland, where they got off the Drew Holiday money, I think there's a serious benefit to them dumping Simons just due to their cap situation. They are still in a situation where if they can shave $12 million off their books, they duck below the luxury tax. And any team below the luxury tax gets a payout at the end of the season, which is expected to be, as of now, in the $14, $15 million range. So this is largely a financial incentive. Now, I think it makes less sense than we would have thought it made at the beginning of the season, because Boston seems to be competing. And there's news that Tatum may actually make it back this season. It probably won't be a full-strength version of Tatum if he's playing, but certainly they're exceeding expectations. In this construction, the Cavaliers send Lonzo to Boston, and they send a second-round pick to Brooklyn. You can take your pick of which year, but I just said, they're 2028 second. Boston sends Simons and Garza to Brooklyn, and they send a couple of seconds to Brooklyn in the process. The reason they have to send seconds along with Simons is because they want to get off that money. They get off it, and they duck below the luxury tax, and effectively, they turn a guy like Simons, who's an expiring contract anyway, into a $14, $15 million payout this season. And the second reason I think that they would do this is because Brooklyn would be sending Haywood Highsmith, an expiring $5 to $6 million deal to the Cav, a guy that we saw with Miami, very solid defender, very reasonable catch and shoot three-point shooter, and Day'Ron Sharpe would go to the Celtics. I also have Drake Powell going to the Cavs. That's just to make the money work. So the rationale for the Celtics is to shave $12 million to get below the luxury tax, which would save them approximately $40 million, by the way, in tax dollars. And the rationale for Brooklyn is they're taking on money and they're eating Simons to add a handful of second-round picks. Now, for the Cavs, they give up a second to get off Lonzo. That is true and unfortunate. But in the process, they bring back Haywood Highsmith, who makes less money. They save a bit in tax dollars. And quite frankly, the appeal of this for me is I had to come up with a deal that involved Boston. Haywood Highsmith, I think, is a more productive player than Lonzo Ball. So this was a lot of work to bring in a guy who is just adding to a glut of reasonably unattractive options on the wing. He's certainly not somebody that I'm saying, well, this is our starting three for the future. But I do think he's a productive player and a gritty player and adds some toughness. Mike, your thoughts?
I love this because you know how I said I didn't have a deal for every team?
Mm-hmm.
I could not come up with one for Boston. I literally could not figure out a Boston deal that made sense. None of the salaries line up, the money. Like, I tried everything to get Peyton Pritchard to Cleveland just because I love Peyton Pritchard. There's no way to make it work. There's literally no way to make it work unless you trade Sam Merrill, who is the one person I can't say. Like, I'm not trading Sam Merrill for Peyton Pritchard. Like, that's just, I mean, I would in basketball sense, but like, I'm not
I don't think either team would do it, to be honest with you.
No. Both teams would say, like, both teams, it's off the table. I don't have a Boston deal. This is the most boring Boston deal in the history of humanity, Bob, which goes to show how difficult it is with some of the restrictions with the first apron and the second apron teams. We should just move on. That deal works.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
We have some other interesting ones, I promise, but some of these teams
let's go to Brooklyn because we talked about them as a facilitator, but here's a very simple, straight up deal. Jared Allen, love him, but you move him to Brooklyn, who I don't know why they would do this. They're playing super big in the sense that they have Claxton, who's a solid center. They have Clowney, who's also a big guy. They have Michael Porter Jr., who's one of the best rebounders at the small forward position there. This would be more of a, listen, you're taking on a talented player. You're assuming that he's going to remain contract neutral at a minimum, that he will have future trade value. And in the process, what you send back to the Cavaliers is Day'Ron Sharpe, who, while not a starting center big, is one of the best offensive rebounding bigs in the league, albeit off the bench. And he's on a very cheap contract, $6.25 million this year, with an additional year after that. So this is a financially motivated move for the Cavaliers. And the second guy, I threw Cam Thomas on there. Maybe that's unrealistic, but being that he was at odds with Brooklyn and ended up just taking the qualifying offer as making next to nothing, he has veto power over any trade because of this. He could refuse to come to Cleveland. But in this hypothetical, what I said was, yeah, you're losing Allen, but you're getting a replacement level big who could at least fill the meager minutes that Kenny is willing to allot to a traditional center. And Day'Ron does occasionally fire some shots up from three. He's not exactly just a guy you camp under the rim, but he is a very good rebounder for a center in terms of guys who might actually be acquirable and are on low money contracts. And Cam Thomas is just a swing to actually get to the free throw line. A frustration for me when I watch Cavaliers basketball is that most games we end up on the wrong side of the free throw battle. And if Cam Thomas is anything, he's a spark plug off the bench who can get his own buckets. Is he a good fit culture-wise? Who knows? But again, I don't want to lose Allen, so I better get something that entices me back.
I don't hate this. Cam Thomas would probably veto this deal, though, because he already complains about not getting enough shots in Brooklyn. And then he goes to a team with Darius and Donovan. I can't think of a less Kenny Atkinson-like player than Cam Thomas.
Agree.
He's literally give him the ball. You might as well go back on defense. He's incredible. His shot making, for people who haven't watched much Nets basketball, and my dad's a Nets fan. I grew up a Nets fan. I watch still way too much Nets basketball, Bob. Some of the most difficult shot making in the league, hands down, bar none. The dude's an assassin, but he's a one-man offense, and he really plays 1-on-5. Like, it wouldn't be a fit, but I like this deal. I actually think adding Sharpe was a guy that I was interested in last trade deadline. I'm still interested in Day'Ron Sharpe. I think he'd be a great fit alongside. He
comes up a ton as like a Dean Wade straight trade type situation. I would see him come up a lot. Yeah.
So I like this. I would do it if I was. I don't even know if it makes sense. I don't know if I do it, but it makes perfect sense as to why.
I think the only way it makes sense, honestly, if I'm the Nets, Mike, the only way it makes sense for me is if I've just conceded that Cam is going to walk away for nothing in the summer, and I say, okay, we're in a rebuild, because it's working out magically for them when you look at what they did with Michael Porter Jr. He is, if anything, he's upped his value. They may get additional assets if they move him yet again. So in that regard, I think Allen is a guy who you say Cleveland doesn't utilize him. Let's bring him in here and hope that he can prove to be a 2010 guy if he's featured. But the problem with Brooklyn's roster is that they committed a bunch of money to Claxton. So it almost doesn't make sense unless it's in conjunction with another move that moves one of those guys on. So
Bob, I have a Nets trade.
Okay.
And I called my dad for a little advice on this. He's still an avid Nets watcher. Darius for Porter Jr. And then you have to add picks because Porter Jr. has more, and by Porter, I mean Michael Porter Jr. has more trade value right now than Darius Garland does.
Do you think that's the case, though? Do you believe that? And I ask you why. Because he's got 1 year left after this. Then he's presumably going to want to be paid. I think there's a second caveat you can bring up, which is how much of this is numbers on a terrible team.
All true, Bob. I think the toe injury on Darius is the prohibitive fact. If Darius is 100% healthy and there was no concerns that the toe would ever be an issue again, Darius has more trade value. Because the toe is something that I know from talking to people around the league that they have their – I mean, Kenny has come out and said, like, Darius is still fighting through it. We don't know exactly when that toe is going to get back to 100%, if it ever will get back to 100%. I'm pretty confident in saying that the Nets would need draft picks from Cleveland in order to accept that deal. So my dad said 2 first-rounders. I think that's a little heavy. I talked to my buddy who works for an Eastern Conference team. I just said, what do you think the extra compensation would have to be in this deal? He said 1 first-rounder. So Darius plus certain amount of picks for Michael Porter Jr. You could go mega-sized, huge, humongo lineups with Porter Jr. at the 2, Dean Wade at the 3, Allen, Mobley, and Don. I know it's not a perfect fit. Don's not a real point guard. He plays best alongside a point guard. But hypothetically speaking, you could close games with Wade, Porter Jr., Hunter, Evan, and Don, which gives you offensive firepower all around. Porter Jr. is not a perfect player. He has his flaws, don't get me wrong. But I think I could talk myself into that one.
I will say this, Mike. As far as stretch bigs go, you're not going to find a guy with a balance of shooting and rebounding as good as Michael Porter Jr. I think the concern is he's a bit of a wild card off the court from a cultural standpoint. But my bigger concern, truthfully, is beyond that. I just feel like we're kind of at a sell low point for Darius, and we're kind of at a sell high point for Michael Porter
100%.
Jr. The idea that the Michael Porter Jr. you're seeing in Brooklyn is the same one you get when you plug him in alongside a lot of star power in Cleveland. I don't know that that's a given, but certainly he is the guy from an archetype standpoint that I think you can look at and say, okay, well, this is a supreme version of what you would hope from the DeAndre Hunter position, scoring, rebounding, can space the floor, very good 3-point shooter. So, okay, this next one, Mike, I got one for Charlotte. I really like it. I don't think they would ever do it. Okay. So I'm bringing it up on the screen so you can look at it. We are sending out Larry Nance Jr., who's an expiring minimum contract. I'm greasing it with a second-round pick. Quite frankly, I think it would probably take a couple second-round picks. And I'm sending it to Charlotte in exchange for a top 10 offensive rebounder in the league, a man who bludgeoned us when we played them last, and that's Moussa Diabate. He would come back to the Cavaliers.
100%.
I would do it in a heartbeat, which is why I think this makes it one of my least realistic trades, because I can't even think of an argument as to why the Hornets would do this if they believe that they're on the upswing. The only way that I can backwards deconstruct this trade to get to a point where Charlotte would accept it would be if Moussa Diabate simply does not want to be there moving forward, and they're saying, well, we're going to get off of him a year and a half ahead of time because we're worried about that outcome. And I wouldn't be if I'm them. I'm taking a guy who's a great rebounder, making a minimum salary for the next year and a half over a couple of seconds.
I mean, I would do this as on the Cavs in a heartbeat if Charlotte would accept this deal. The other way you talk yourself into it if you're Charlotte, and once again, I don't think it's a good enough argument, is you want just another veteran in the locker room, and Larry Nance, who hasn't been good on the court, has been terrific off the court for the Cavs to help mentor some of their younger guys. But yeah, I can't see Charlotte giving up Diabate.
It was a pipe dream, but like we said, we got to do one for every team. So
I have
one for Charlotte.
I did, and it's toxic. It's toxic.
Can I guess it?
Please.
Does it involve LaMelo and Darius?
No. I think it's even more toxic than that.
Okay, hit me.
And I would not do this, but just for the sake of a fun discussion, how about bringing back Colin Sexton and giving up Jared Allen?
Okay, so Sexton's an expiring.
Yep.
So in as far as long-term impact, you'd be getting off the Jared Allen money.
Yep.
For a half-season rental of Colin Sexton. I would burn this place to the ground, Mike. I would burn it to the ground.
I know. Listen, I told you I would not do it, but Charlotte, they have Kalkbrenner, who's their center. They just traded away Mark Williams. Bring in Jared Allen, a guy who doesn't need the ball. I actually think Jared Allen would fit great in Charlotte with all the young wings and young guards they have as a rim runner. For the Cavs, you get to bring back, and once again, I would not do this. I want to emphasize, I would not do this. You get to bring back a guy in Colin Sexton who, if nothing else, is a guy who can get to the paint, create shots for himself and others. Bit of a ball hog, but whatever. Fill the Ty Jerome-esque role that the Cavs have been lacking off the bench this year. And I would just love to see the fan base have to react to getting rid of someone that they clearly have some qualms with in Jared Allen. Some mixed belief thoughts.
This is what you wanted. This is what you get. Now is it so good, Cavs fans? Now is it? That would be the only saving grace, is that I would be celebrating the immediate regret that would be heaped upon the Cavs.
It would be bad. But I thought that was at least fun. I wouldn't do it, but
I like it. I don't like it, but I like the idea. All right, so we'll move on to Chicago. I'm going to shotgun two at you here, Mike.
Shoot.
The first one
in Chicago, so I'm glad you have two.
Okay. The first one is DeAndre Hunter and a couple of seconds for Vooch. Vooch isn't expiring. The Bulls have 7 expiring contracts, I believe. They're set to have a ton of cap space. But if recent NBA trends have shown us anything, it's that having cap space is getting less and less useful in this unrestricted free agency era because almost everybody extends early. Even Jared Allen, who maybe the front office didn't even see having a long-term fit here. They extended his contract because it just gives you a lot more flexibility as you move forward in the future. Now, the Bulls, they're approaching this a different way, the same way that many question how their front office approaches everything, whether it be a trades, be a contract structuring. But as they head into a summer where Kobe White's a free agent, where Vooch is a free agent, where Zach Collins is a free agent, where Ayo Dosunmu is a free agent, all these guys coming off the books, in this situation, they take back Hunter. I don't think it's as cumbersome for them because they have a lot of cap space. And they get back Vooch, it's a spacer of a big who, while he may be on his last legs, they get a couple seconds to do it. It helps make up for the mistakes that they possibly made with the Caruso trade, not getting other assets back, or the Lonzo Ball trade. A lot of people thought they should have got assets back in that deal for Okoro. They did not. So that's one proposal. I'll hit you with the second one back to back. It's just a different iteration where we send Jared Allen. That gets them their center of the future. The Cavs get back Jalen Smith, who's a reasonably solid center option and not a starting line type guy, but he's on a cheap deal. Another $9 million this season, 9.5 next season. You get back a half-season reno of Ayo Dosunmu and a 2029 first. The reason I always, in every one of my constructions, I'm trying to get a 2027 first or a 2029 first to open up the flexibility for the Cavs to be able to trade firsts and get around the Stepien rules restrictions. So in this scenario, it's effectively Jared Allen for a first and a serviceable big to plug in and fill whatever minutes he was in Jalen Smith. And whatever you get from Ayo is nice, but in all likelihood, he's not back next season if you do this maneuver. So those were my two, Mike. Did you like either more than the other? Do you think they're both ridiculous?
I don't think ridiculous. I would be looking similarly to you as a way to get more picks in the future and get off some contracts that you may not love. I love Ayo, by the way, just as a player. So I lean more towards that one just because I know he's not coming back. He's going to make too much money as a unrestricted free agent to be able to be retained, in my opinion, unless the Cavs significantly shake up the books. But because of how much of a fan of Ayo Dosunmu I am, I would lean towards that deal. I also don't know how Vooch fits when you also have Allen and Mobley, and I understand there's other deals that would go along with this. But
I think my thinking there was that Vooch can shoot the three, and if we get to the end, I would take any too big construction over no too big construction in a lot of these situations. And my hope would be that maybe you could convince Kenny to lean into a scenario where even if he's not comfortable deploying Allen at the end of the game because he doesn't stretch it out to the 3-point line, you could still get serviceable rebounding from a Vooch and be able to play him alongside of Mobley if that was the case. Again, though, that's more of a you're renting him for this is a if you want to get off DeAndre's money for the future. Then
this is a great way to get off. If your goal is to get off DeAndre, it's a great way to get off DeAndre. I'll give you that, Bob.
Yeah. Okay. Detroit, this is maybe my wildest idea, and I think it'll be my most hated idea. But I swung big because I've been giving you a lot of, straight down the middle turds so far. But this one, I'm going for the bleachers here. In this scenario, Evan Mobley is going to Detroit. We hear Detroit rumored in a lot of situations about star hunting, and most of it so far has been, okay, do they go after a Lauri Markkanen or do they go after an Anthony Davis? In this scenario, I think if you took Evan Mobley and you said you could have him over one of those other two, you should at least be able to get the comparable deals that we're hearing for those two guys out there. In this scenario, there were two iterations I put together. This one is the one I felt was more realistic from the Detroit standpoint. They send Tobias Harris, who's expiring money, making $26 million. He's really just to make the money work. For the Cavs, yeah, it's nice he can play some small ball four. In that regard, he's filling somewhat of a vacuum, but he's not in your long-term plans. Jaden Ivey, he's a pre-agency acquisition. He looks way less necessary this year with the emergence of Jenkins and what you're getting out of Karis LeVert and Cade Cunningham just being otherworldly. So in this regard, Jaden Ivey's he's a swing at hoping that, okay, as he comes back from the big injury he had last year, that he'll get better and better and that he'll be a serviceable part of your rotation. And you get him in a situation where he did not get extended. So you can leverage his restricted free agency rights. And then Thompson is the other guy. Thompson is the guy where you're taking back another guy who I look at as a very high-end defender in the NBA, but a guy who can perhaps be deployed more against perimeter people. Now, this would create a huge hole in the front court, and I get why everybody would hate it, but the main reason would be I also bundled it with a 2027 first, a 2029 first, and a couple of seconds to go with it. So all in, the Cavs send out Mobley. I think the focal point coming back would be Thompson, Ivy, 2 firsts, and a couple of seconds. Would the Cavs do it? They're kind of in a contend now window. I don't see why they would do it. The other iteration that I considered with this is take Tobias Harris and Ivy out of it and bring back Beef Stew and Duncan Robinson. Same deal other than that. And the reason I said that is because then you get Thompson and Beef Stew, who are both very positive defensive focused players. Beef Stew has exactly the type of mentality that a lot of people feel we lack on this team. My hesitance there was they also make more money and they're on the books for longer. So you don't get any of the financial benefits that you get by escaping Tobias Harris after this season. Do I think the Cavs would do it? No. But I think it would be crazy to see a couple of teams who people think are amongst the best chances to come out of the East making a massive deal like this.
I'm not sure JB Bickerstaff's a huge Evan Mobley fan, which brings a little reality into the situation here out of a crazy trade. And Bobby, you're right. This is significantly crazier than the first couple that you have proposed here. I wouldn't do it. I guess like I would hear the thought process for the Cavs on why they would do it, but I just would be out on that.
I don't think they do it either. This is just, there's a secret component of this trade that just benefits only me and nobody else, which is that people would get to see what Jared Allen can do in a vacuum without Evan Mobley, which I think is much greater than what people actually understand it could be. So I know this is a wild one, but I don't know that there's any other trade that I pitched that involved Evan Mobley. So I didn't want everything to be, let's dump Lonzo onto somebody else. So I swung for the fences a bit.
My Detroit trade was so boring that I'm like embarrassed to mention it after this, but it was just a straight up Max Strus for Karis LeVert swap.
Oh, okay.
Detroit gets a little more shooting. Cleveland gets a little more creation, an extra insurance policy if Darius, gets injured, has to miss some more time, a little more playmaking on ball, but I don't like that's boring. You just put Evan Mobley in a massive, massive deal with Detroit to reunite him with JB Bickerstaff, with Tobias Harris being the main financial component coming. I can't stand Tobias Harris. Like, just and it's nothing against him. He's a good player.
He's just money to make it work.
Yeah, and he's in all these deals. Like, it's hysterical that his contract is the one that is like the key cog in an Anthony Davis trade or a Giannis trade, or you know what I'm saying? Like he's the player that got this ridiculously overpriced deal because they had to pay somebody, and he's obviously not a player worthy of that salary at this point of his career. And no disrespect to him, I think he'd know that too. But your trade's a lot more fun than mine. I wouldn't do it, but I didn't put Evan Mobley in any of my trades, so I give you courage from the balls to do that, Bob.
All right, we got to go to Indiana. This one you've heard, I'm sure, which is Indiana clearly has a giant hole in the front court. Jalen Tyson, I mentioned it on the last pod. Jalen Tyson has a better rebound rate than their starting center and their starting power forward. So in this situation, they clearly were caught a bit off guard by what happened with Miles Turner. They're an extremely frugal team, have not gone into the luxury tax in team existence. So Jared Allen would be a linchpin in the front court that they could bring in. In this deal, they send back a first-round pick, Obi Toppin, Ben Shepherd in a second. But essentially, it's Obi Toppin and a first-round pick. The question you have to ask yourself if you're a Cavs fan is, okay, how much do we value getting off the long-term money of Jared Allen? Do we want to move before it jumps up into that $28 million range? If they do it this season while he's at 20, well, then if you could get a first-round pick in the process, certainly the Pacers are not going to give up their first-round pick next year with the way this season is going, but you could get a 2027 first, which, again, Stepien rules, frees the Cavs up to do different things with the 2026 and 2028 pick, which they've maintained. Shepherd is really just to make the money work. Toppin, a guy who succeeded collegiately in Ohio, who's definitely a space the floor, run the floor big. I don't love the deal, but in terms of my justifications for it would be, I think it leans into the style that Kenny seems to want to play, and you get a first-round asset if you're going to dump Jared Allen anyway.
I actually would do this one, Bob. I'm not going to lie. I've been an Obi Toppin stan, I think is probably the right way to fit. I love his game. I think he fit alongside a bunch of different iterations and lineups as your 3 or your 4. I actually like Ben Shepherd more than most too. The fact that you would free up draft picks, including getting an extra one, but now you have more flexibility at 26 and 28. And it just comes down to, as much as I like Jared as a player, if Kenny's not going to play him in the fourth quarter, and once again, we could argue till we're blue in the face on whether or not we agree with that philosophy or not. He's a $20 million bench player when it matters most. And if Kenny thinks Obi Toppin or Ben Shepherd can give him more valuable minutes and give him more lineup flexibility down the stretch, we've seen Toppin perform well in the playoffs, then I actually would do this one. I had more frustration building an Indiana trade, Bob, than any other team because I wanted so hard to bring Pascal Siakam to Cleveland just for the fun of trying to make some major swing. Just because of the second apron stuff, it's impossible. I unless you give up Donovan Mitchell, which was an immediate no when it comes to, I want to pair Siakam with Mitchell, not
I hear you.
Reverse it.
Well,
so I was very frustrated with the Indiana trade machine options.
I was too. That's a good segue, though, because here comes my first Donovan Mitchell trade. Are you ready? We're going to Miami, the Miami Heat, a team that's long been rumored to want Donovan Mitchell. And this deal brings back elements of other deals that you've constructed. It's a 3-team deal.
Ooh.
And it involves the Brooklyn Nets. I'm putting it on the screen now. I'm sorry, it's very small because it's very convoluted. But in this situation, Donovan Mitchell goes to the Miami Heat. Coming to the Cavaliers from the Brooklyn Nets, Michael Porter Jr., Kel'el Ware from the Miami Heat, a second-year big man who's breaking out, and a 2026 first. I believe that's a 2026 first. It's so small I can't even see it. But it's coming from Miami to Cleveland. Now, the logic here is that, and Brooklyn, in this scenario, Brooklyn gets Tyler Hero, Simone Fontecchio, and they get a couple of firsts. They get a first and a first-round swap, I believe, is what I did for them. So in that scenario, MPJ and Ware come in, Mitchell goes out. A 2029 first comes to the Cavs. Now, in most iterations where you send out Mitchell, I'm going to want 2 first-round picks minimum, maybe 3. But in this scenario, the justification for getting less is that you get back Ware, who's on a cheaper deal and presumably could allow you to move Jared Allen if you wanted to, if you believe that he and Mobley were big enough and could thrive alongside one another. You get back Michael Porter Jr., who I think we've spoke about the benefits of his play style and how it could benefit Cleveland. And Brooklyn, in that scenario, their rationalization would be that they get swap rights on a couple future firsts from Miami for exchanging Michael Porter Jr. for Hero. Those guys are basically what I would consider a similar class of player. Guys who are fringe all-stars if they're the leader on bad teams. I mean, Hero was an all-star last year. Michael Porter Jr. could be an all-star this year. They're both approaching having to get new big paydays. They're in that same general vicinity salary-wise. Hero makes 33, MPJ makes 38, but they're both going to be hoping to get max dollars and probably the type of max extension that teams will want to shy away from. So in this situation, I think Brooklyn straight up would prefer MPJ to Hero because they've seen he's thriving and they've seen he's driven up his trade value in their culture. But in this scenario, if they get swap rights down the line for a Miami team that's taken a swing on a Donovan Mitchell who's heading into the back half of his career, then I think maybe they would justify being the third cog in this team. Because the reason it's complicated for Miami is they're only this is one of the things I think makes it most complicated. They're only 1.6 mil under the tax apron. In this construction, one of the reasons I think it's possibly unrealistic from the Heat is that it pushes them up over it. But I think you have to say, well, if it's Donovan Mitchell, they're going to be willing to forego their $14-15 million in tax payout. And in that scenario, I kind of think if you're making a move that's not done for the purpose of getting off money or just acquiring draft picks, I could not come up with many constructions that brought back the level of talent that adding in a Ware and an MPJ did to the Cavs. And this really, the only way you can justify this, moving your best player, is if you simply don't think you can afford to give Mitchell the type of Devin Booker extension that he got in the summer when 2027 hits. Mike, it's a bit complicated, but I love your thoughts.
I love the way your devious, demented mind works, Bob, because this is, in a way, brilliant and incredibly stupid all at once. I think the Nets would be as crazy it sounds, I think the Nets actually make out the worst here.
I agree.
And they're the team that helps facilitate a lot of it. If you are going to trade Donovan, it's because what you just said. He's going to get, or if he signs a max extension with Cleveland, which he's earned, It's going to be in the 60s to $70 million for a player who we've seen his body kind of break down at the end of seasons and consecutive postseasons now. The play style, he's been an incredibly efficient shooter this year. Is that sustainable as he continues to age? Is any team going to want to pay a player now that much money if he's not a consensus top 5 guy with all the other restrictions that come with the second apron and how difficult it is to fill out your, like, the only reason you make this deal is if you don't think Donovan will either re-sign or you're not comfortable paying him. So just want to make sure that's on the books. But if you are going to trade Donovan, getting MPJ back is a hell of a starting piece. Kel'el Ware is a guy who I think is incredibly talented. If his motor is on, I mean, he has all-star big level potential. Incredibly young, incredibly athletic, can space the floor. He's not a great shooter yet, can space the floor. I could talk myself into this in a hypothetical world where you had to trade Donovan Mitchell. I've seen much worse proposals. And just to give you an example, I'm not going to mention his name, but I got tagged in a tweet earlier this morning saying, would you trade Donovan Mitchell for Jalen Johnson on the Hawks straight up? And I was like, well, the Cavs would have to put more assets in because I don't think Atlanta would accept that just because of how young Jalen Johnson is, contract, all that stuff. Donovan's a better player than Jalen Johnson right now, but age, that's the kind of return that I think would be realistic for a Cleveland deal in a Donovan trade. Realistic-ish. Obviously, players can change, but I think that's the kind of package you would get back. So as far as fake trades go, Bob, well done, sir.
Thank you.
Well done.
Thank you. I really did try to put a lot of thought into these from other teams' perspectives. I'm not saying that, you have to stretch to make some of them work, but I did try to think about other teams' considerations because what I would tell fans when they're doing the trade machine is it's not just about getting the green check mark. It's about considering the thing that the trade machine never takes into consideration, which I think you need to look at in every trade is where are these teams financially? Because there can be a lot of incentive to either duck below the tax apron, or the other thing that people don't consider is there's a lot of teams that are right up against hard caps who simply cannot add money in a way where, yeah, it may seem like they would do the deal in any other set of circumstances, but because of the rules, that's not something that you're shown necessarily. It will, the hard cap part will factor in the trade machine, but the tax apron stuff does not. And that's something I think far too many people overlook because you see it every season where these teams move around at deadlines and you get these unexciting deals like Nurkic for Sexton or Marcus Smart to Washington that really the whole focus of them is just putting yourself in a better financial situation. It has nothing to do with the talent involved.
The Miami trade I came up with just simply because it makes money work. I would not do this, but after Hero and Darius exchanged jabs in the postseason last year, Darius for Hero and 2 first-round picks, just for the sake of making it a little spicy. But I wouldn't do it. I like Darius way too much. I don't like Tyler Hero's game, but the money works on that. And maybe if you were dead set and didn't trust Darius's toe to fully recover and had more faith that a Hero who's equally as bad of a defender, even though he's bigger, to fit your big backcourt guard requirement that people seem to have just because you're 6'5" does not make you a good defender, would satisfy some people on Twitter and make them shut up. But I wouldn't do that, but that was my Miami trade. Yours is a lot more fun.
Okay, so I have a trade with Milwaukee. I don't have the graphic for you, but that's because this one has been talked to death. So I'm just going to give you the construction of it. It's Giannis and Andre Jackson Jr. to Cleveland. Cleveland sends Mobley and DeAndre Hunter to Milwaukee. They send Lonzo Ball to the Utah Jazz along with a couple second-round picks. And they have to send at least 1, maybe 2 first-round picks to Milwaukee. So outgoing, the big pieces are you're in. Okay, so even if I said 2 first-round picks with Mobley and then a couple of seconds with Lonzo. Okay.
I would be in, Bob, on any iteration of a team with Donovan and Giannis in the Eastern Conference right now. The rest doesn't matter to me. If you have those 2 in the East, you should be able to waltz isn't the right word, but you should be representing the Eastern Conference in the finals in each of the next 2 years at a minimum. And if some injuries break right, you got a chance to beat OKC, Spurs, Houston, Denver, whoever comes out of the West. And I just think the pairing of Don and Giannis from a stylistic standpoint is damn near perfect. Like I genuinely do. So I would, any Giannis trade, I'm in on. You have a chance to get a top 3 player in the world who's 31, right? 31, I believe he's not that old yet. I'm just inherently in. So
I'm with you. Here's the things that I didn't bring up in that trade that are also relevant, which is in order to make a trade for Giannis, the Cavs in the process are ducking below the second apron when they do.
Yes.
So there is some financial benefit to get. I don't care about Hunter. In a scenario where Giannis comes back, yes, it sucks to lose Mobley, but straight up, I would take Giannis over Mobley. I think he offers the physicality that a lot of the Cavaliers fans feel we're lacking. Personally, I think we over-index a little bit on Evan Mobley in terms of his overall value, because what else can we do in a situation where he's clearly our best two-way young player? I wouldn't hesitate to move him, even if it shrinks the runway, so to speak. I think the concerns are, I think it's a valid concern to say, okay, Giannis could walk away after next season. So I don't think you can do this maneuver unless you have a commitment, unless Giannis through back channels or on the record makes it clear that he could be content playing in a situation like Cleveland and competing for titles here. But if his discontent in Milwaukee, if the reason he's throwing down, end of the game dunks in the face of the Chicago Bulls is because he's so frustrated that they're not winning, why wouldn't he want to be here? So I think Giannis is the level of player that, yeah, I would do it. I would cash in all the two future first and even give up Mobley for the sake of bundling Mitchell and Giannis and still knowing that I think you can absorb DeAndre Hunter's loss, quite frankly. I've loved what we've seen from Tyson. Yeah. We have Max Strus coming back. Sam Merrill is playing incredible basketball. I think this is a situation that warrants an all-in chips to the center of the table type of maneuver.
If Giannis doesn't warrant it, who does? Right? He's 3 at worst, the 4th best player in the world. He is unquestionably, in my mind, the best player in the Eastern Conference. And I don't think it's all that close, Bob.
I agree.
And once again,
I hate playing him, but I love Giannis. And I love the physicality and just the sheer force of will that he has. And on a team where I think we regularly have to ask ourselves about attitude, you never have to question it with him. Mm-hmm. So this next move is absolutely appalling. But I had to involve the Knicks. It's exceptionally difficult to do because the Knicks are one of those teams that also can't take back more money than they send out as they are in the first apron. So you have a scenario where in order to make this maneuver, you have to rope in a third party. I'm bringing the deal up on the screen. I roped in their crosstown brethren, the Brooklyn Nets. And in this scenario, this is a fun one. It's completely absurd, but it's fun. In this situation, we send a first-round pick in 2031 with DeAndre Hunter to the Nets. We have to give them the pick to facilitate this deal. They take DeAndre Hunter onto their books for the next year and a half, so we have officially sent out $23 million. Now, what we get back is Haywood Highsmith. We've spoke about him. But the more fun component is Mitchell Robinson, a man who's been an absolute tormentor of the Cleveland Cavaliers from the New York Knicks. He's on an expiring nearly $13 million deal. That adds a brute to our lineup. We had to give up DeAndre Hunter to do it, but for those of us worried about toughness and rebounding, there is not a better man in the league you could bring in to shore up that issue. Now, why in the hell would the Knicks help their hated rival? They wouldn't, but in this hypothetical, the reason they did it is because they get back Day'Ron Sharpe and Cam Thomas. Is that an upgrade? Absolutely not. But here is how I talked myself into it, Mike. Mitchell Robinson is headed for a payday. The Knicks are in salary cap purgatory. They're about to enter the same hell that we're in. They're maybe a year behind us on this cycle of pain, but as all these deals kick in, the Brunson extensions, the Mikal Bridges extensions, Karl Anthony Towns as he approaches another deal, this would be a way to get back another elite offensive rebounder, not as elite, nobody's as elite as Mitchell Robinson, who you have an additional year of control for at half the price, and you get Cam Thomas, who adds scoring punch off your bench. Jordan Clarkson is no spring chicken. You have the emergence of Kolek. Certainly you have other options back there, but Cam Thomas, he wouldn't have to move. He could just stay right where he is, just head over to the other team and just ball out and score a bunch of buckets and grift his ass off just like Brunson. And then everybody walks away happy. Not really, but that's what I did, Mike. What do you think of this construction?
I mean, listen, Mitchell Robinson has unfortunately been nightmare fuel for the Cavs front line for 3 years now. If you could find a way to add him into this locker room, I'd do it in a heartbeat. And I like DeAndre Hunter. He's been disappointing this year, Bob. It's not addition by subtraction, so don't take it like that. But I don't think losing DeAndre Hunter in any kind of deal would be as big of a loss as I think it may seem on paper. I think they could find that scoring uptick from other guys, even though they don't have Ty Jerome coming off the bench anymore. He just hasn't been as good as I think the Cavs have needed him to be. And defensively, he's been a traffic cone this year. Like all the metrics, the eye test, it all adds up with this one. They've been significantly better defensively with him off the court than they have been with him on the court. So if you can find a way to get Mitchell Robinson, I'm in. I don't think Knicks would trade. I think Mike Brown loves Mitchell Robinson. I think the whole organization loves Mitchell Robinson. I think Jalen Brunson loves Mitchell Robinson. So unrealistic.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know it is.
They're very fun.
They're certainly not helping us.
And it's one of the perfect hypotheticals that we could talk about forever. And it'll
never happen.
Discuss it'll never happen. Yeah. Plus the Nets and Knicks after the Mikal Bridges trade, I was like, they'll never make another deal. And this is a deal. I'm like, you know what? I could kind of see why they may do this. So, bravo.
And I like that Jalen Tyson could be the poor man's Josh Hart in this situation with the vacuum of minutes that's created with DeAndre Hunter's departure. You might actually get to see him still maintain his place in the rotation, even when we're at full health, which would be very exciting to me. So next team is kind of equally difficult to work with, and a lot of that is due to the financial constraints. I'm throwing this one up on the screen. This is not a trade that's new by any stretch, but the cap situation has gotten even more difficult. The Orlando Magic and the Cleveland Cavaliers. Well, what could they do? Hopefully nothing. But I had to come up with a deal, so this is what I did. Darius Garland, you send him out. You bring back Jalen Suggs. You have to bring in a third-party team because Orlando is right up against a hard cap. They're less than $1.25 million away, meaning they cannot add significant money. The only way I could make this work was they dumped Jet Howard on the Jazz. The Jazz send Kevin Love along with Jalen Suggs, and the Magic send us a pick as well. They're sending a 20-30-second first in that deal to the Cavs, and in that situation, Cleveland walks back with Jalen Suggs, who's certainly not as good as Darius Garland, but he's a different archetype. The logic there is less about do you get the best player? You don't. The Magic get the best player, but it's a runaway. But that's also why they're giving up draft capital in order to do this. In this scenario, Jalen Suggs, the benefit of him is he makes what I still consider to be too much money, but it's de-escalating. So where he makes $35 million this year, you plug him in alongside Donovan Mitchell. Next year, he makes $32 million as opposed to Darius Garland, who will rise to $42 million. You've just shaved $10 million off the books, and it gets substantially bigger every consecutive year because Jalen Suggs is heading downward, taking up a lower percentage of the cap, whereas Darius Garland is heading upward. Additionally, you get extra years of control, whereas Darius Garland has 2 years left after this. Suggs has 4 years left after this. So this is a mentality trade more than anything. I hated it when it was proposed in the summer. I'm still not a huge fan of it now because I still think even though Jalen Suggs is a better financial burden than Darius Garland, just what's on the books in terms of dollar to basketball skill, I don't think he justifies anywhere close to the same amount of money as Darius Garland. So I don't think it's ridiculous in that regard. It would be very tough for me to say, okay, we've got a perimeter defender who's a monster out there and just kind of a ball mover facilitator in a secondary way. We don't have a true point guard anymore. We've put ourselves into the shoes that Orlando is in right now and that they would be seeking to get out of. But that's the logic for why Orlando would do it, is that we have seen them struggle when they continue to play in this offense where they try to rely on the sum of the parts. Is it going to be Desmond Bane? Is it going to be Paolo? Is it going to be Franz? We should be able to get enough creation from all of them because all of them are reasonably good for their positions, but they're not true offensive engines. And Paolo has struggled mightily this season as the focal point of that team. He's one of the only guys on the team with a negative, plus minus when he's been out there on the court. So Tom Haberstroh had a big article about that, and then Paolo hits a game winner. Mike, your thoughts on this deal?
So like you, I hated the construction of this deal over the summer when it was discussed. Now that we've seen Darius get back, and I can't shake the idea that he may never be fully healthy and fully Darius again. I am much more willing to entertain this discussion than I was over the summer. I think you nailed it on the head. Suggs is not a perfect player by any means. He's had his ups and downs offensively. He's been a streaky shooter. He's obviously not the playmaker that Darius is. He's not anywhere near offensively as talented at any facet of the offensive game as Darius, but he's a much better defender. He gives them a little more point of attack defense, which has been an issue for the Cavs this year since they have lost to Coro. And like I said, Hunter just hasn't been the wing defender they need. I love envisioning lineups with Suggs and Jalen Tyson together, and maybe even throw Craig Porter Jr. in there and Max Strus and give me Thomas Bryant at the center for an all crazy lineup. Like, that's just a lineup that's ready to have a backyard brawl at any given moment. I would listen, if Orlando called and put this on the table, I would have a long discussion, Bob. Long discussion, just because I'm not 100% sure Darius Garland is going to get back to being the full version of Darius Garland. I think the Cavs need to win for championship. Suggs has had his injury issues in the past, and I am fully aware of those. But when he has come back, he's gotten back to being Jalen Suggs. I am not 100% confident, and it hurts to say, and I wish it wasn't the case, and I wish there was more tangible evidence that would lead me to think Darius will get back to being just flat out 100% old Darius. Toes, man, they're tough. So I would have a long conversation if this deal was proposed to me and I was Kobe Altman.
The other thing I wanted to say about this deal,
and the money, you made a good point on the money, by the way. Like,
very add to that point, as it sits right now, the Cavs are projected with 12 guys on the roster. You have to have 14, so it would be slightly larger than this. As it sits right now, heading into next season, the Cavs are projected to be about 21 million over the second apron. If you don't bring back Lonzo Ball and you shave 10 million off in a deal of Suggs for Garland, you're basically right there. Dean Wade's also an expiring. You could swap him out for minimum contracts. You could get below the second apron with this type of deal heading into next season. So that's an additional benefit. It would matter what the Cavs did on the fringes. It would matter where the draft pick ends up that San Antonio currently has. But you'd be within striking distance that you could pull it off to get underneath the second apron without having to grease teams with assets to do so. So that was my Orlando presentation. Mike, did you have anything for any of these teams that I've done in the last several?
No, you just mentioned the Knicks and Orlando, and those were the two teams that, unless it's a straight 1-for-1 swap, I didn't think anything was not that it was
hard to do it
plausible, but just nothing was worth discussing. So I did not have those two. I have two more deals though before we wrap up.
Okay, well I'll give you my Philly one. That one is just sorry, this is not Philly. I don't know why I put that up there. The Philadelphia one for me brings Andre Drummond to the Cavs. Now he makes $5 million as an expiring. In this situation, we have to rope in the Nets, and there's a reason for that. While the Sixers, you could involve them in some deals. The Sixers' incentive for doing this deal, they're getting virtually nothing back in this scenario. They're getting some, heavily protected second-round picks that won't convey, or whatever you want to call it, rights to players that are never going to come over. The reason the Sixers would do this deal, they're sending Drummond to the Cavs, Eric Gordon to the Nets. Eric Gordon is on an expiring deal. It's a minimum, so that's just over $7 million. The reason Philly would do this deal is they're $6.9 million over the luxury tax. This maneuver is to get $14 or $15 million and put it in their owner's pocket. Now, they're still sort of in the playoff picture in a way where I don't know that they would trust dumping Drummond when Embiid is what he is, and Adem Bona, while I love him, they have to be willing to rely on those two men to fill most of the center minutes. So I don't necessarily think they do it, but maybe you could give them a second-round pick or something to incentivize them. The Nets, they take back Lonzo from the Cavs, and in this deal, the Cavs get Drummond. They shave some money off their books, which would be tax savings for Dan Gilbert, and they get a brute who hopefully, if Mitchell Robinson is out there and you say Jared Allen's not cutting it, well, then you throw Drummond out there. It's a very simple deal. I'm trying to plug a hole. I want a blunt instrument to get second chances and to end possessions, and Andre Drummond would be that guy. Years later, I know the first time around in Cleveland didn't go well, but I think this is a different, more reasonable Andre Drummond who understands his place in the league and would be happy to fill a role on the contending team. Mike, your thoughts?
I also tried to finagle Andre Drummond and Kelly Oubre to Cleveland, both expiring deals. Unfortunately, the money works, but because Philly's the first apron team, they can't take on more money, so you have to involve a third team. You have used Lonzo Ball as a trade chip, as this extra facilitator in, I think, really smart ways today, Bob, and I did not think that much in depth when we were doing these one-for-ones to add third teams in, so I had an Andre Drummond
and conference to get really creative here next time, Mike.
Yeah, well, I had Drummond and Oubre for Strus is almost it doesn't work in the trade machine, so you have to finagle an extra like two-way or minimum salary to make it work. But basically, if Philly wanted to get off or get something back that they had more control over instead of losing 2 assets for nothing when they walk in free agency, assuming they don't re-sign them. And the Cavs wanted to add a brute force in Drummond, who is a terrific rebounder, if nothing else. And Oubre, a guy who I've always liked, maybe not as good as a fit offensively as Max Strus is with the Cavs system, but a much better point of attack. Not much better. That's a slight to Max. He's probably a slightly better, if not just flat out better point of attack perimeter defender with a little more size than Max Strus is. But the money doesn't work without adding a third player in or a third team to facilitate some of that extra money. So probably not even worth discussing. So I like the idea of getting Drummond back. I just wish Philly wasn't a first apron team, so they had a little more flexibility.
Yeah. All right. We've got 2 teams left. Another hated team up next, the Toronto Raptors. This one, clearly I posted the wrong one here in terms of my screen cap, but I'll just give you the Raptors pick, the Raptors trade that I came up with for them. In that scenario, I had to rope in a third team because it's another one of these situations where I didn't know what we could offer in terms of taking back more money. They can't take back more money. So this deal was Jared Allen went out to Toronto. We take back Pirtle, and I said 2 first-round picks. That's probably a bit aggressive because, ultimately I hate Pirtle's contract. I think Pirtle is one of the worst contracts in the NBA. He just
I think we talked about this in the last pod we did, Bob, how we both like Pirtle as a player theoretically, but the fact that Toronto extended him when they did just makes negative sense to me. Negative sense.
Yeah, it was a difficult thing to stomach. I had Pirtle coming to the Cavs with 2 first-round picks, and this is why I don't think they would do it. It's because I don't think they value Jared Allen highly enough to pay. While it would be great to bring back a center in a deal where, okay, you get off Pirtle. Pirtle makes only $19.5 million next year, but then they sign him to a 3-year extension in the range of $90 million, and he's already a big man heading into his 30s. So I think it was incredibly stupid to do that. But you've got 4 full seasons of Jakob Pirtle, and he's guaranteed $100 million in that time. So that's why I say the Cavaliers would need to be incentivized to do this, because we already know what a precarious situation they're in with the cap situation. But in this scenario, they would get back a 2027 first and a 2029 first. The Raptors would get Jared Allen in this scenario, where he's essentially going to be making the same money that they gave to Jakob Pirtle, but a year sooner, and they can get out of the deal a year earlier. And he's younger and he's better, personally. I mean, every time Allen plays Pirtle, he outplays him. And then the Nets, they just take Jamison Battle because, again, the Raptors have to send out more money than they take back in this scenario. So Jamison Battle heads to the Nets with a 2nd-round pick. I just put Battle in there because I like him as a player. I enjoy watching him every time he plays, despite the fact that he plays for the Raptors. And in that scenario, we get a replacement for Jared Allen, albeit not a flashy one, not what I want. We get his terrible contract, and you turn Jared Allen. This is the only construction I could come up with where I could turn Jared Allen into a couple of first-round assets. And it's similar to the Desmond Bane KCP deal, where I think Bane became even more expensive because in the process they were trying to get off the KCP money. That's how I rationalize this. This is you're not giving up 2 first-round picks to swap Pirtle for Allen. You're giving up 2 first-round picks to get out of that contract, exactly, and bring back Allen in the meantime.
So I told you my dad is a avid Nets fan. He just learned about ESPN's trade machine just recently. So the other day he sent me a Cavs Raptors trade that I just wanted to share with you. And this works on ESPN's trade machine. You can see, Bob, the successful green.
Oh, yep.
Not sure if it actually works with the other stuff, but my dad, so shout out to Chris Lucas, suggested Darius Garland to Toronto for Quickly and Mamu Shlakavelli, who I can never pronounce his last name.
The Seton Hall guy, Sandro Mamu.
Yes, Sandro, exactly. Cavs would save $7 million in the deal. It is simply we like Quickly at a lower price than we like Garland at a more expensive price. So I wouldn't do it. I told my dad I hated it at the moment, but I wanted to let everyone else tell my dad they hate that deal too if you're a Cavs fan.
Well, here's the thing. It is illegal because
good.
The Raptors cannot take back more salary than they send out. So in that regard, it could not work. You could rope in a third team, though, technically, and do the same kind of workaround that we did. Yeah. Nets, Utah, come on down. That's the other thing. I just want to have a big picture discussion about those 2 teams specifically, because due to our second apron constraints, Nearly every time a facilitator team is needed, people will turn to one of two teams, and there's a reason for that. Brooklyn has roughly $15 million in cap space available right now, where they can just absorb contracts without sending anything back. That's extremely valuable. A team like Utah has about $10 million in cap space. So I think when we get into these hypothetical discussions, one thing I generally always end up pushing back on is take the Giannis deal, for example. If you're the Utah Jazz and you or Brooklyn are the only thing standing between Cleveland and being able to acquire Giannis, I am going to charge a pretty penny. Danny Ainge is not a guy who's a reasonable negotiator for most people when you're on the other end of it. He's a guy who's going to try and wring everything out of you that you can. So when we have to look at a market that essentially consists of two teams, and I guess we should be grateful that there's two of them because you can pit them against one another, but every team in the NBA who is trying to get off money or deal with these can't take in more than we send out machinations, and that's not just us. Yes, we're the only second apron team, but like I said earlier in the podcast, New York, Golden State, Dallas, Minnesota, Boston, Toronto, all of them, those are all first apron teams who cannot take back more money than they send out. And then you have teams that are essentially within a mil and a half of hard aprons, the Lakers, Orlando, Houston, the Clippers. It's nearly half the league that would be going to those same two teams hoping that they can facilitate aggressive maneuvers. So in that regard, the one thing I say is when people talk about Hunter, right, and getting off Hunter, we'll just give a second-round pick. I don't think it's going to be that cheap. Lonzo should be cheaper because he's a virtual expiring this year. And there's a lot more teams you can plug him in at $10 million than there is a DeAndre Hunter making $23 million. DeAndre Hunter cannot be absorbed just straight into anyone's space. It's basically impossible in that regard. So I do think people underestimate the cost of a facilitating team. Sometimes it seems like you're giving up an inordinate amount of capital to get them to just take on dead money for half a season or for a season and a half, but it's expensive because it's a limited marketplace. And I think people sometimes overlook that part.
I also just want to give the Nets and the Jazz the honorary MVP of this podcast for being the facilitating teams. And almost every single time we need a third team to make the money work. So just shout out to Brooklyn and Sean Marks. Shout out to Danny Ainge in Utah for not spending an exuberant amount of money on your roster and having an excess of cap space to take on some assets that other teams need to make these deals work.
Speaking of taking on assets for capital, that brings us to our final team in the Eastern Conference. And thank you, Fear the Fro faithful, for sticking in this whole podcast. Be sure to check out the Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show. And we'll hopefully get to revisit the Western Conference. But for the Washington Wizards, this is a team that I don't like any of the deals. I've heard them say that I've heard rumblings. Oh, they want Darius Garland. They want a guy who can be the facilitator for this offense. They have some guys breaking out. Sarr looks great. George looks great. They've taken on dead money in the past, bad contracts, to get assets to do it. They did it with Marcus Smart. They did it with Chris Middleton. They did it with C.J. McCollum. In this scenario, C.J. McCollum, Ohio's own, a guy who's lit us up a time or two on an expiring $31 million contract roughly, would be coming to Cleveland with 2 first-round picks, 2027, 2029, Trey Johnson for Darius Garland. That's the construction. We get back CJ, who we have as a half-season rental. You're plugging him in. He's hopefully giving you a lot of what Darius Garland gives you, even if he's not a conventional point guard. Trey Johnson is your upside swing as a guy who was taken this year, and a lot of people believe in heavily, and 2 first-round picks. Would Washington do it? I don't know. They're kind of in a rebuild to the point where in this scenario, I had them sending us Portland's pick in 2029 and their own pick, but I would assume there'd have to be protections. They can't be conveying picks when they're at the top of the lottery. But would they do it? I don't know. If they're that interested in Darius Garland, I do think any construction bringing back C.J. McCollum is going to have to come with pick capital for the Cavs, because you're not getting rid of Garland as a straight dump. Is too aggressive? Perhaps. Maybe it would only be 1. But if it's going to be 1, there can't be as many protections coming, and I'm going to want one of Washington's own picks, hopefully. Mike, your thoughts?
I like Trey Johnson. I don't like, when I was going through the Washington, I'll tell you my deal in a sec here, Bob. Like, I don't love a lot of the pieces they have. I get why Washington would want Darius Garland. If you're going to give Darius, that feels like a team that would actually be willing to give up enough assets for him. But I don't know. I just none of that super entices me, if that makes sense. And it's not any of you're doing. It's just Washington's roster is kind of just like, you know,
Yeah,
it is what it's like. Like even my deal, I had DeAndre Hunter for Kispert and Bilal Coulibaly. Save you a little money. You may have to throw in a pick. You actually probably have to throw in picks for Washington to be incentivized to take on the more expensive older wing and give up on 2 younger wings with more potential. So it's Hunter and picks for those 2. But like, I don't like their roster. Like Alexander Sarr is a guy I like, but
there's 2 guys on their roster that I would jump at, and that's Sarr and George at this point.
I just don't think they're realistic to move in any deal.
Yeah,
so I
wouldn't do it either if I'm them, because they're at the beginning of this whole rebuild process. That's the part that makes me be like, yeah, I'm sure in a vacuum they would love Darius, but I think they would love Darius in this leverage state where they think the Cavs would consider dumping him just to get off his money. I don't think they're ready to come to the table with pick. So in that regard, that's every team in the Eastern Conference. I think we did pretty respectably. We're at an hour and 15 minutes. Thank God we broke this up, Mike, because this would have been the longest podcast in the history of the Fear of the Fro.
Nobody wants to hear our voices for 3 hours, Bob. So I think breaking this into 2 parts was the right way to do it.
No. So Cavs fans, though, what I would tell you is this. I have a couple in the clip. Brett Clapper, a listener many of you are familiar with. He brought me some proposals for the Western Conference. You're free to submit your own that we could react to at the CavsPod.com audio mailbag. Hopefully, we'll be back. I would love to rope Mike in for a Western Conference one, but if not Mike, I'll find some other sucker who's willing to give me a hour and 15 minutes of his time.
I like talking trades, so there's a good chance I'll be back doing the Western Conference with you, Bob.
Well, Mike, I really
about my LeBron for Jimmy Butler deal that I totally misunderstood the assignment.
Oh, well, yeah, I told Mike a trade for every team, and what I meant was a Cavs trade for every team, but I didn't clarify. That's on me, Mike.
Well, I was at the gym. I'll tell you the story, then we'll wrap it up. But I was at the gym, like, I gotta figure out a Utah, like a Utah Senate. Like, I was like, man, Bob said he had one for every team already. I spent 35 minutes like trying to come up with one of these random ones, and I came up with a LeBron for who. Real quick, just bear with me. Who says no on that deal?
LeBron for Jimmy Butler.
LeBron and Bronny for Jimmy Butler and Will Richard there.
I don't think it's the Lakers. I mean, well, you know what? It's hard to say because
I actually think it works on both sides. I think both teams would say yes to that. I actually do. In a weird fake world where this would ever actually be proposed, I think both teams would say yes.
I have a hard time knowing what to expect from. I think my hesitance from the Lakers side would be this. Do you value being able to bring in someone younger with the cap flexibility that will be created when LeBron's off the books versus is pushing forward another year of Jimmy Butler money really how you want to do it? And I think you can make the argument, yes, because look at unrestricted free agency. It's not that alluring.
And by the way, Bill Simmons came up with this. This is when like this is something Bill Simmons mentioned. And then I was thinking about how, what, when, where, or why. And that free agent class, not this upcoming season, but in 2 seasons, when Butler would come off the books, is when potentially Giannis, Jokic, and all those guys could come back up. If you're trying to clear your books for that summer, then taking on the extra year of Butler lines up with your trajectory a lot better. And
that's true. And also, if you still have the guy's rights, it opens up sign and trade possibilities.
Exactly. So I don't know. But yeah, when you said make a trade for every team, I was looking Charlotte and Utah. Like,
well, I heard one. You spoke about Tobias Harris. I heard one the other day that would send Tobias to the Clippers and Kawhi would be going back. I'm like, how many deals is Tobias Harris going to get shipped to the Clippers in this scenario?
It used to be CJ McCollum was the default. He's in every single fake. He was the fake trade MVP like 7 years running. I think Tobias Harris has taken over that proclamation. But
yeah, this was great. Yeah, this was great. And guys, be sure to check out the Ultimate. What's the holiday schedule? Are you guys back at it when?
Tomorrow. Well, I don't know what I'm saying, but we were off Thursday for New Year's Day. It is a Tegna-wide holiday, so they tell us do not come in, or if you come in, you will not get paid. So I decided not to come in. And then we are back Friday. We have our last Browns reaction show on Sunday, and then we are back regular schedule Monday through Friday like usual. So
all right, beautiful. Well, check it out. Ultimate Cleveland Sports Show on YouTube and anywhere else you get your content. They are prolific. They're out here cranking out stuff every single day. Not like me. I give you an hour and 15 minutes and then disappear for weeks at a time. So till the next time, Cavs fans, if you like this podcast, 5-star rating and a review. I cannot encourage you enough to get into the CavsPod.com audio mailbag. Mike Lucas, McNuggets, thank you. An honored guest. I love having you on. I love your thoughts. And I look forward to more in the new year.